Hey everybody, Greg Barron, Professor of Real Estate. Thanks for joining me today. As always, on my YouTube channel, I've got a few things to introduce to you today that hopefully will be a benefit if you're starting to look at 2025 and you're asking yourself, what the hell is my journey going to be like this year? I'm going to give you a strategy map that we use at the Barron Companies. We've got 5 operating companies. We work in many states, a lot of employees, and so we have got to have a specific strategy that we go over every year. This year we started in November having multiple meetings, but if you haven't started, don't worry about it. Do it now. Just do it good. So the first couple of things I'm going to talk about is a value proposition that you need to anchor into, a little bit about mission, and then I'm going to move into what a strategy map is that we use, and in very simple terms. You don't need to go out and hire a $10,000 consultant to do this. If you'll follow some of these examples and start to flesh these things out, use a whiteboard when you do this in your organization, whether you've got 2 people or 200 people. These are some of the things that we've done year after year after year, and they become invaluable. So let's start with values first. I'm going to talk about these real quickly. This is one thing that a lot of people don't flesh out. And for us, you anchor into the way that you do business, both internally and externally, through 4 things with us. And we'll have an acronym that I call ITEG. I stands for integrity. T stands for transparency, E stands for exceptional client services, and G stands for the growth of people. So the first thing on the list is I for integrity. It goes without saying that you should have this, but after almost 40 years in business, it's amazing to realize how many people have had stunted growth in this particular area. One of the things that we have in addition to many is we own it. We own it. If we make a mistake, we want to be able to own it to both our employees and those clients that we work for. Number 2 is transparency. You'd think that we live in a world that you could be transparent. You hear all kinds of things about, what kind of news out there that certain people talk about. You don't know that you're getting the full information at all time. But for us, this transparency, it has to be anchored into the DNA of our company. In both internally and externally. If we've got investors that need to know specifically what's going on, we don't have any problem with being transparent. We produce our financials every month for our companies, and our employees know exactly where we are, and we don't play patty cake and hide the weasel. The next thing we strive for is exceptional customer service. Without the client, we don't exist. We tell our employees, the client is there for us to be able to create value and produce revenue and hopefully ultimately produce profit. So with exceptional client services, and let's talk about the real estate business, we want to make sure that we hit deadlines. We want to make sure that we are clear on our communication and do it in a timely manner. Even if we don't know the answer, we get back to our clients and let them know. So exceptional client services could be a whole host of things for you, but that is the E in ITEG. The last thing is the growth of people. If we don't have those that work alongside of us, we like to call our staff elite, and we want to grow them. They come at a certain level. We want them to go out gaining incredible skill sets to increase our own personal worth out in the marketplace. So we have structured mentoring. We have intentional training that's calendared. So the growth of the people as a value proposition for us is very important. So those are the 4 things. I for integrity, T for transparency, E for exceptional client service, and G for the growth of people. I hope that helps you. So again, you could go out and hire somebody for 10 grand to create a strategic map for you, but let me just share a little bit of ours. And the next thing we have is our vision and mission. Now, in a vision and mission, we always say that those things don't change over time. Our strategy does, but vision and mission do not. Let me talk to you a little bit about mission. There's three things that you need to ask in a mission statement, and you need to really let this percolate for a while and flesh out what it means to you. So a mission statement should include these three things. What do you want to do? Who do you want to do it for? And how do you want to serve them? Really, it's just those three simple things. What do you want to do? Who do you want to do it for? And how do you want to serve them to accomplish that? So the last thing you need to do before you hit your strategy is you also need to nail down your vision. A vision basically is two things: where you want to go and how you want to get there. And one of the things I want to say to you about vision is most people have a poverty mentality about vision. A lot of times I like to say, if you don't have that top-down view, you're going to put real constraints, or I like to say fences, on your vision. Let me give you an example. Have you ever seen the picture of Jeff Bezos in his garage with a little sign on the wall that says Amazon and him behind his computer? I can guarantee you that he had no constraints on his vision. He saw the world very differently. Most of the time, we have a poverty mentality as it relates to vision. So my charge to you in your ultimate vision is, if you have no constraints on you, what would you ultimately want to achieve? And the next thing I would ask you is, so how do you plan on getting there? And by the way, use the BHAG method: big, hairy, audacious goals in your vision. Don't limit them. I was a first-generation college student. My parents didn't go to college. I realized early on, though, that unless I educated myself, and it took me forever, I didn't finish my undergraduate until I was 31 years old. But I never lost the vision of accomplishing it. I went back to school in my 40s for graduate school. So a vision can take a long time to accomplish, but it needs to be hairy. It needs to be audacious. It needs to be big. It needs to be a BHAG. So do not put constraints on your vision. You're only limited to the mass between your ears, which is your brain. And you have the ability to be able to codify knowledge year over year over year to accomplish something that is absolutely incredible. I had no head start. You don't need a head start. You just need a vision that's audacious. So really the meat that I want to get into is strategy. I'm going to break the strategy down into three simple things. The first thing is positioning for long-term success. You need to determine what your differentiation is in your company. One of my favorite professors in college was a marketing professor. Her name was Cynthia Montgomery, and she said this to the class. She said, if your company went away tomorrow and it didn't make a difference to your client, you have a differentiation problem. Now, let me say that one more time. If your company went away tomorrow and you're not missed, then you have a differentiation problem. I always fight for something within our businesses that has an element of differentiation. Otherwise, you're in an auction. Otherwise, you're just competing on price. One of your goals and your strategy should be, if you went away tomorrow, you need to be missed. That's as simple as I can make it. If you don't, or if you're not missed, you've got a differentiation problem. The next things that you need to know is, where do you compete and who do you compete with? You've heard me talk about focus in the past. Well, you need to hone in on where you're going to do this and who you're going to do it against. Write it out. Have it as specific as possible. Understand your market as much as you can. And the last thing is very simple. What kind of resources do you have to allocate to it? A lot of you listening to me don't have a lot of resources to allocate to it. Well, that's fine, but you got what's between your ears. For example, if you've got the ability to learn and there's knowledge out there, those are resources. So allocate some of those resources to deploy your strategy in the future. You know, I can tell you, I didn't start in this business to get into real estate development. I didn't get into the business to be a software developer. I didn't get in the business to manage millions of square feet of commercial facilities across the country. We had to learn it. We had to allocate resources. And some of those things we could buy, but a lot of them we had to learn prior to getting into it. So don't give me the excuse that you don't have the resources to be able to do it. I have, others have. You just need to go out and find those. So again, in your strategy, make it very simple. How are you going to position for long-term success? How are you going to be different? Number two is, where do you compete and who do you compete against? And the last thing is, what resources are you going to allocate to get you there? So the very last thing I want to talk about, and I can do a deep dive on this later on, but there's a lot of information about this out there on the web. It's called the Balanced Scorecard. I love it. We live by it. I was trained in it years ago when I went to grad school. It was developed back in the 90s and first came out in the Harvard Business Review, I think in 1992, as a game changer. It's just a very simple system that you can use, and you could talk it over with your staff. You could put it together yourself. The Balanced Scorecard is centered around vision and strategy. It always has to align with your vision. It always has to work into your strategy every year. And it contains 4 basic spokes: your financial processes, your internal controls, your learning and growth, and your customer service components. Now let me read to you a little bit further description, and I'll put a graph up here so you can follow it, but there's a lot of stuff out there on this. Number 1 is financial. How do we look to shareholders? How do you look to your own investors? How do you look to yourself and your wife? The second thing is customer perspective. How do our customers see us, and how do we want to improve that? The third thing is internal controls. What must we excel at to do what we do best? And the fourth thing is learning and growth. That has to do with your own employees. What are you going to do to elevate them to do what you need to do to align with your vision and strategy? Balanced scorecard, 4 spokes, 1 hub of vision and strategy. Now, outside of each of those, you need to have key performance indicators, KPIs as we call it, and make it simple. Use the KISS method. Keep it simple. Don't have 15 measures in each if you're just starting out. For example, in financial, the top 3: operating expenses, revenue, net income before taxes. Another example in internal controls, the KPIs for the real estate business would be like these 3. Maybe it's marketing and sales and how you measure that. The next thing would be tenant turnover or tenant retention. Those are internal processes that you can measure. Let's talk about the customer perspective of the C of that. How about referrals or customer satisfaction surveys, or maybe complaint resolution time? You can develop these key performance indicators or measures for each of these 4. So tie a bow on all of this. You got to have your values locked down, and then you got to have your vision, then you got to have your mission, and then you got to develop your strategy. All of that is a strategic map. Lastly, after you do that, develop your balanced scorecard for your organization for the future. Financial, internal processes and controls, customer service, and learning and growth centered around your hub, which is your vision and strategy. That's a lot of information. If you've got any questions, please reach out to me. I'll be glad to answer as many as I can. I'm going to Philadelphia next week to help a company kind of tighten up theirs for the rest of 2025. I've done this for years. I'd be glad to answer some questions. We do this in all of our operating companies. As always, if you like the video, be sure and like and subscribe. And remember, educate so that you can evaluate and ultimately execute, especially this year, which is going to be a good year, to increase your own personal wealth. We'll see you soon.